And thanks so much for staying with Morning Live. Still on the World Economic Forum. Now, the new economy is one that everybody is talking about. But one of the key missions of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, is, of course, to improve international trade by encouraging dialogue between businesses, politicians, academia, social society groups, shapeshifters, and, of course, industry agendas. And the real test of the success of the World Economic Forum's worth is, of course, to see what global developments and trade deals actually occur thereafter. And to discuss this, I'm joined by Busi Mavuso, the COO of Business Leadership South Africa, and Thabile Wonci, who's the Black Management Forum's Managing Director. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you very much, Sakina.
So let's start with the obvious, where people feel just another talk shop. So perhaps we should assess what are our expectations from this particular gathering at Davos. Let me start with you, Thabile. What should our expectations be?
Thank you very much, Sakina. First and foremost, obviously, to tell the story of our country, put our best foot forward in such that we entice capital to trickle down into our economy. But I guess, for me, what I'll be so interested in, having seen or received that capital, what then happens? Will that go into addressing things, for instance, like skills development, address employment, bring the companies that are still largely outside of the mainstream, that is black business, into the mainstream? There's this aspect of our economy that we're sort of ignored, which is education. How do we bolster it in such that our graduates are able to compete globally, And how do we, again, form those partnerships together with institutions of higher learning, with business, in such that what the institutions will be producing would be what, the markets are looking for. At the present moment, we've got, the skills mismatch. And then the other thing, we have sort of embraced, this notion of the fourth industrial revolution. Perhaps it's a good talk, but in our context, how relevant is that, given the fact that other, sectors within our economy having experienced the third industrial revolution, even the second? So those are some of the things, from where I'm sitting, I think we should also be looking at.
Well, see, your expectations, and especially when one considers that the real work and the real fruit of this particular labor needs to be seen when people return from the WEF.
So I think really, Sakina, it's to allay fears of foreign direct investors. I think about a year ago, we set out on a mission to raise $100 billion as a country. So we've got an opportunity now, we've got a platform, to discuss some of the contagious issues that may be coming out from the country. Issues around some of the policies, that still remain contagious. I know the land issue last year in Davos, was a big issue. We've got an opportunity to say, where are we now? Where's South Africa? Where are we taking this? By the ANC government, who's also a government in sitting at the moment. We've got an opportunity to discuss issues such as the South African Reserve Bank, the issues such as the SARS issue, the Zondo Commission, the corruption issues. How are we dealing with them? Our economic growth that is not even touching 1%, our high unemployment rates, which is currently sitting at 37% in terms of the expanded definition. What are the strategies? What are the interventions? What is the plan, for South Africa? We've got elections coming up, in May. I think there is a lot of uncertainties, and I'm worried that this may overshadow some of the discussions. Is ANC going to get, the 2/3 majority? If it doesn't, what does that mean? Are we ready for a coalition government? So I think it allows us to, it allows it to be a dialogue session. It allows the investors to can interrogate and ask questions that are important to them. Reciprocally, it allows us to get a sense of what the headspace of the world is at. What is it that we need to do if we understand that the growth of this economy cannot be achieved by only local investment. We need foreign direct investors. What, are their interests? Where are they channeling their monies? I was looking at some of the stats, for instance, Sakina, it says that a lot of foreign direct investment, I think globally goes towards financial services. And I know one of the themes that they are discussing is that of financial services. So what are the trends there? What are some of the contagious issues? Where should our financial services be, for us to be able to attract the 42% foreign direct investment, that is channeled globally in that industry? How do we fare as a country? As Thabile said, if we agree that the fourth industrial revolution is the way to go, we know, for instance, that we're going to have about 10 million jobs in the next 5 to 10 years of programming and coding. Where are we as South Africa? How do we start meaningfully engaging in this debate? To what extent is our education system, for instance, positioning us, to be able to retain at least 10% of those jobs? To what extent are we starting to align with some of the world's biggest minds? If we agree that we are an open economy, which therefore means we are not only competing with ourselves, but we're competing with the rest of the world. To what extent, therefore, are we in tune, are we in sync, are we in line, to play on the same stage that the global leaders and players are actually playing at? So I think this is the one engagement that is very critical in as far as, putting yourself on a scale and say, how do I really fare as South Africa?
Spot on. And whilst all of that is happening, Thabile, we are not the only ones trying to sell our country.
Absolutely.
Everybody else is there trying to sell and competing for the very same foreign direct investment into their economies. Then you have on the sidelines all these other bilateral discussions taking place. Zimbabwe, for example, and our relationship with Zimbabwe. Yesterday we heard President Cyril Ramaphosa talking about South Africa coming to Zimbabwe's aid in some way financially. And back home people are saying, hold up, what about us? You're rushing to talk about, helping Zimbabwe with their debt. What about us? We've got interest rates rising. We have high unemployment, all the things that Busi just outlined. So what is South Africa selling when you have a Zimbabwe who says, we are ready to privatize, we are ready to, comply with all sorts of other rules and regulations you put in place? Whereas here, there's a lot of uncertainty, policy uncertainty, especially at this stage. So how do we stand out above everybody else, Thabile?
That's actually the quagmire that we're finding ourselves in. As much as there's just so many opportunities to sort of receive the capital and deploy in many needed areas within the country. However, there's geopolitical issues that are happening within the SADC region that we can never ignore. You have mentioned Zimbabwe, for instance, that the economy has been run down. Are we better? No, we're not in a better position because we're also in dire need of a capital injection. Look, for instance, a huge company like Eskom that's riddled by so much debt. It's sitting with so much debt in their books. And what's the conversation now? That do we uplift that debt and put it in the fiscus, into the fiscus? And then what's going to happen to the, to our rating? It might push our rating up. So there's many things that we can never sort of ignore, such as this growing inequality. That's another thing. And if you look again within the business economy, where we're saying that yes, there's talks that we've got to grow the economy, it's something that you support, but in truth, will that economic growth and development be inclusive? Where will that put people that are already outside of the mainstream economy? So so those are the few things.
If we were to now cut the slash and get to the point, with regard to inequality, number one, which is a major problem. In years gone by, we used to talk about the triple axis, of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And inequality is one that we shy away from constantly because evidently we don't know what to do about inequality and how to basically close that particular rift. But then unemployment, Surely, at this point, we need to get to more concrete solutions.
Correct.
How do we tackle this? Can we at least start that conversation about how to tackle this problem? And I'll come back to you, but Busi, you're nodding.
Sakina, we need to get people into jobs. We need to get people into jobs because once you solve the jobs issue, you're solving the unemployment issue. Once you're solving the unemployment issue, you're solving the poverty issue, which is currently sitting at 53% in South Africa. Once you solve the poverty issue, then you start dealing with inequality. And there you have got the three triple challenges of South Africa. It's unacceptable that 25 years into democracy, we are one of the most unequal countries in the world. When we took this country over in 1994, as this ANC-led government, our inequalities were not where they were at in terms of the Gini coefficient. We're probably sitting at 0.49 or whatever the case is. We are currently moving towards perfect inequality, sitting at a Gini coefficient of 0.7. It is totally unacceptable. But I think my view is that let's get people into jobs, because I think, so, and your question is how do we do that? Let's look at what are the industries, if we understand that the South African economy and the market is structured such that we've got a lot of unskilled laborers. What are the industries that have got a large absorption rate? You know, tourism, agriculture, mining, manufacturing. You know, so it's all good and well for us to want to mimic the world, you know, towards focusing on fourth industrial revolution, but we know that automation, we are not ready for automation as a country. Should we not be dealing with upskilling our people so that we get the reason why we currently have the issue of unemployment is precisely because you have people that are willing and able to work, but there is a mismatch in terms of the positions that we have, you know, in our companies and the skills that the market currently has. So
what should government do right now? How do we kickstart this process?
Let's focus on the industries that have got an opportunity to can actually absorb a lot of unskilled laborers. You know, it's agro-processing, it's agriculture, it's mining, it's manufacturing, it's tourism. Let's pour money into that because you need to get people into jobs. But it's not going to be you just focus on that. We've got too many problems to have the latitude of just focusing on one thing. So we have to be doing these things in parallel. While we're doing that, can we talk about our education system? Can we talk about how we've allowed our kids to pass with 30%? When I passed my matric in 1994 under Bantu education, it was 50%. So if you're saying it's okay for these kids to pass at 30% and yet you want to go and have global conversations about fourth industrial revolution, you have not set these kids up to can compete. You know, kids in Asia, you know, at grade 4 and grade 5 are being taught programming and coding. So already you are setting these kids up for, they've lost this race, Sakina, before they've even begun, you know, the journey, as it were. So to what extent then do we multirally, you know, start dealing with the issue of, you know, unskilled laborers, and how do we open up those industries for absorption and start dealing with our education? You know, there isn't...
The two are not mutually exclusive.
They are not mutually exclusive.
And that's the fortunate bit. But again, what are we doing? We are one of the countries that spend probably some of the highest amounts of our budget on education.
Absolutely.
And yet, no return, no meaningful, should I say, return on investment if you look at those who do not fall into, you know, the top quintile, as it were, of learners who actually graduate from school. So something needs to happen there.
Yes.
But beyond that, as the government and other South African representatives are in Davos right now, who should they be approaching? You know, you've got all the world leaders, all the shapeshifters are sitting there. Who should they be approaching, and what sort of concrete plans should they be presenting? Because this is the other thing that I wonder about. Do you have a concrete plan to say, I need to go to Davos and I need to meet Busi and I need to put this plan in front of her, and my mission is for her to sign on this dotted line so that I can come back with at least 10 jobs. Do we have that, or are we just going there as a tick box exercise that this is one of those things that we need to do?
Sakina, it does appear that it's more of a tick box exercise, a nice thing to do. It's a yearly event, therefore our presence, just to mingle with, you know, other oligarchs around the world. In truth, if as the country we could sort of reposition our value proposition into the world, and sort of as well opening ourselves up to also give the potential investors or whoever that want to come and deploy capital something meaningful, a return for their money. And further than that, there's many other issues that we ought to be looking at, such as governance. That's one of the things that we hardly talk about. We do talk about in the sense that it's one of our key challenges, but in truth, no one knows what to do about it. Corruption within the SOEs. We know for a fact that it's rife, but in truth, how many, what's the propensity for us to really uncover these things and put the perpetrators behind jail? The maladministration, what's really, what's so much of a challenge to be sitting with, companies that are not performing well, and I mean, we've sort of normalized those things. And it's so nice and good to go out and reposition or position the country as this destination of choice or investment destination of choice. But in truth, that money is going to come. And what's going to happen? Exactly what we have seen in the past, where a winner takes it all.
Well, Thabile Wonci, that's a terrible indictment on us as a nation, as the country, but these are some of the harsh realities that we have to deal with. I have to unfortunately say thanks to Thabile Wonci from the Black Management Forum, and also with us Busi Mavuso from Business Leadership South Africa. And just talking about Davos, the World Economic Forum, and what's happening there. Downward forecast, and this is a revised forecast of world economic growth by 2 percentage points to 3.5%. So that is also the backdrop against which this is taking place. With that, it's time to go to news.